Hey, hello and most welcome to H840. Hooray! Not too bad. We're having a rather clement afternoon here. No sunshine, and it seems that the weather is now opting for being a bit more unclear a couple of days, I would say. That's by the look on the sky. It's clouding up. It was earlier quite sunny, but now it's clouding up and it's also getting rather moist. So it's a good idea to buckle up a bit. I will do that here. Using deconstruction as a method and learning a skill. This is something in the skill or manual, I would say, even of Rodolphe Gachet. It is amazing once I finally now learn how to use something that I realize I've been wanting to be able to do for a very long time. I have studied deconstruction since 1997. I started out when I still had a rather big apartment in Lotsgatan, and decided one day that I should really get into this thing, deconstruction and Derrida. And I remember I purchased a printer to print out text of Derrida. I got all these books and the project was on, and I think I spent an enormous amount of time originally trying to get into the whole thing. But I realize now that there is also a possibility to go further than understanding deconstruction and Derrida's philosophy. And that's go beyond and practice what Derrida was doing. And that's the actual method of deconstruction. And the actual method of deconstruction goes way beyond what he himself have written, because deconstruction cannot be lifted from its context. Never, ever. It is by in itself context dependent. And a deconstruction of Nietzsche will never look like a deconstruction of Saussure. And the reason is we don't know how the books were written, in what order, so to speak, sequence, how they were organized, what their thinking possibly were at that specific instance. Saussure wrote that and that. What Derrida does is a very, very careful reading to find out about the text more carefully. He helps the reader to understand that specific text and no other text. That insight you get from that text helps with the understanding of Saussure, Nietzsche, Karl Marx, why not John Searle, or who it might be. It is an understanding that everything is unique and it cannot be lumped together. It cannot be generalized. It is by generalizing the reading of the text that the development of polarity is coming to the fore, because there is no, in a way of looking at it, the polarity doesn't really exist. It's just a sloppy reading. When I say sloppy, I don't mean sloppy in the ordinary sense. When I read some philosophical things, I really put an incredible effort. But Derrida goes beyond that. He discovers more. And to do that, we need a gestalt that can be used in many different ways. And here is the tale of the mirror. Because the mirror lends itself to a multitude of things, not just one thing. It is by itself something way beyond any one understanding. It's multiple understanding as it is. And I would say even limitless understanding. When I was younger, I had a place I didn't really like, and in the amusement park in Gothenburg was called Lustiga Huset. And it was filled with mirrors and mirrors and mirrors, and they distorted what you saw in the mirror. You got awfully thin, or you got awfully fat. You started to look curvy. But it was especially this castle of the mirrors, I think it was called. When you looked in there, there were reflections that went on forever, infinitely. An arrangement of mirrors that lended itself to give the impression everything, the image was duplicated, replicated forever and ever and ever, never stopped. And this was of course quite amazing. But this is the same with a mirror idea or mirror gestalt. It's a 3D idea. It comes with a depth. And I think that sets it apart from ordinary ideas that are in 2 dimensions and have outside of themselves a definition. The mirror doesn't have an definition. The mirror is more than definitions. You could say that definitions come out of the mirror. But the mirror itself, or the mirror gestalt, is not a concept. It's not explainable. And it doesn't limit itself to, for instance, reflective consciousness or reflective isolated reflection when you sort of focus on one side of the reflection only. Might it be the one who looking to the mirror, or what reflects out of the mirror? It doesn't have to be that. It can be philosophical reflection, it can be absolute reflection, and you have an infinite of numbers. And this is this infinity that is part of the method. Once you understand that, come to grip with it. And since this is a skill, it is not something you learn once and for all. Never. It's something you get steadily better and better at. And this is how knowledge works. There is no direct understanding like Socrates claimed in the dialogues and in other places. Never. There is no such thing as a correct understanding either. There once more you have the isolated reflection, the idea of a correctedness, whatever that could be, because understanding the mirror, you start to understanding correctedness doesn't really make any sense, which is worse than being unnecessary. And when you learn to do this, the method, which is a learning procedure, takes long time. Without a doubt, this book is one of the more extensive because it tried to teach you something completely new, a skill, and that's a skill for life. Without a doubt, you will always be served by this skill. It will always be there for you. And I would say, like any other skill you learn, doesn't matter if it's playing ping pong or learning how to make a salad of dandelion leaves, or learning how to drive a motorbike. It is something that you do to learn it. You practice. And you don't say, I have a complete comprehension of riding a motorbike. You can say, I can ride a motorbike, but I was at different instances differently skilled at it. So the illusion is complete understanding or 70% understanding whereas the reality is you learn bit by bit. And to say that you immediately understand something is in itself completely wrong. There is no such thing as immediate understanding. Well, at one level, there does exist. You can say yes to something, but then you have this dimensionness. And this dimensionness is little bit like the dimensions that you found in Lustiga huset, funny house. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and it gets deeper forever. That's the actual effect of knowledge. It's a constant deepening. And it's the happening of the deepening that is knowledge. Knowledge is not a relation between something that you could know and the mere reflection, which is identical to the thing you know. It's like here comes a piece of paper, inside is a certain amount of knowledge. My knowing of that should be identical to the inside of the paper. No, knowing is something that always can be improved for any odd subject. In a way, it's different at each time. The difference makes up for ordinary sameness. They come together. Two people who understand something in exactly the same way is in itself a tragedy. It is not a thing to be happening in the world, because we have all different depths, and understanding something in a good manner means to understand it in your manner and not in someone else's manner. That is always wrong, I would say. That is not knowledge. So let me give you an example here. Let's put it in something that doesn't belong to the ensnared circle of philosophy, or what can you say, history of thought or something like that, ideology. I'm going to look into something that I discussed maybe 300-400 episodes ago. Yes, they are adding up now. And that is focus. Focus is disappearing. And I mentioned that we are now having a focus that is almost equal to the one of a goldfish. It's very narrow, it's very short, it's non-continuous. We modern day people seem to be, instead of a continuous consciousness, we are characterized being a disparate, chopped up consciousness that doesn't have any relations to its own part. That's of course is in one take is linear time, that every time unit is unique in a way and not connected to the whole time. But you get a sense of not being a whole person anymore. And this is the dissolvement of the ego. And this is, of course, not the first time this has been mentioned, that we are lacking a sense of self today. For very good reasons, because of our viewpoint coming from the mirror, seeing the outside world as being in priority usually. That's usually how we see it. It's not always, but usually. And that comes to mean that what is inside is of much less importance, and it's actually derivative of what's outside. We made up from the things that are outside, so the subjective has a very little role to play in reality. Many so-called non-dualists says this is a sort of an ideology. I would claim it's not. It's rather a lack of knowledge that can only be learned from. You can only learn it. You can have some insights, of course, and that can be quite massive I had one recently, just one day ago, almost to the minute. But it is a development, and I'm going to read from a paper here how we achieve once more focus. And I would say understanding the mirror function is an absolute prerequisite for acquiring focus, because otherwise this gestalt would constantly split up everything, and it leads in itself to fragmentization, because the understanding of the world today is in itself fragmented. It's not only that it's flattened out, lacking depth, lacking substance, lacking distance. It's also a time ingredient in this, and that is that we are not continuous human beings anymore. I'm pretty sure we once upon a time were more continuous, that the ego was more hold together, and that this process of prioritizing the outside to the extent that the inside becomes dependent on the outside and even made up of particles from the outside or whatever it's supposed to be on the outside. Which could lead to the end that you even claim that you are not conscious, or anything as ridiculous as that. This is a nice article by Upasaka Kuladasa. I forgot his British name, but he writes about how to attain focus, and I realize now that is a real possibility. And I think about the great masters of the Renaissance, whether they were painters, sculptors, stone cutters, architects, polygeniuses like Da Vinci. They all had an excellent skill of being in focus. And it was a focus that was not compartmentalized. It was not excluding. Their focus took in everything around them, what's behind them, what's above them, and the details. And this is because details are absolutely dependent on you taking in the whole. And the whole idea of separation is in itself extremely problematic, to say the least. And it's the modern tendency to think that separatedness, taking something out of its context, it's something that can help understanding. It is almost to the exact note in this specific instance, the absolute opposite. We have seen a compartmentalization the last couple of centuries. We're starting to building what we say different compartments of knowledge, different subjects, dividing them, saying that they are mirror images of each other's but in some way different, and saying they together mirror reality, and that we try like a mosaic to fill out an empty pre-understood. Before understanding, we understand that there is an area that we can understand. And that is an a priori misunderstanding. The idea that the world can be mapped. And that's something that often, for instance, Paul Feyerabend and also Richard Rorty have discussed. It's extremely problematic and it's sloppy thinking, I would say. But it's more than that. It can actually be completely convincing, the whole idea. That knowledge is missing, we need to fill that out. And of course, it also reinforces the idea of a world outside with different cogs in terms of cause and effect, linear time being built up at these different strands of cause and effect, and you get the whole bead of instances that are bound together by the cause and effect. And this sort of locks the whole process in a crowded, stressful situation where you feel that in the end you are losing control of everything because it sort of pushes itself. This is the very development of lack of focus. This is lack of focus. This is you no longer being able to sustain a complete attention. And this is going down the skill ladder on complete attention and becoming less knowledgeable, I would say. Because knowledge is keeping attention. Knowledge is taking in all the 500 subjects or what more you can find at university today at the very same time. Because together, not separated, they make up reality. And of course you would never separate them like that. You would see them as a seamless whole, and you are somewhere located in this wholeness. You are in the equation, so to speak, as an observer. And it's your way of understanding that makes it possible to sign what is understood, to make it effectful. And you need to be there as yourself, as your individual understanding and nothing else. It's you who understand and nobody else. Not a generalized person or a non-person, as we often get the perception when you think about a subjectless world. Which is actually quite scary. Sorry. It's a scary thought, to say the least. We are always already situated in the world, in contrast to be always already parted from the world. We have never left it. All the knowledge that is out there is actually created by the subject and the object in concord. Bar nothing. Nothing, no knowledge is ever not produced by the subject. So dualism is not an ideology. It's making mistake. And the gravest mistake, I think, it is not having an attention. And I speak about a multifaceted attention that takes in all factors in reality simultaneously. Not only a limited set of realization, but many different ways of realizing things. And being able at the same moment to see where you are localized in this context. Localization is important. And of course, this is also information and knowledge coming from quantum mechanics when we speak about non-local insight. Non-local means in this instance it's non-local taken with an absolute position of reality, sort of an origo or a midpoint of universe. Nothing can be localized that way. This is what we learn from quantum mechanics. Instead, the subject is always in on it. How the subject perceives something to be localized, that is localization in quantum mechanics. So from a perspective of Newtonian thinking, it looks like, oh my, everything is moving about. Well, everything is moving about because the bloody subject is moving about. That is how it's working. So Newtonian physics makes it impossible to localize in the real world. And of course, it's isolated reflection and nothing else. But the same goes with knowledge. With knowledge, it's very important to know where you are localized in knowledge. And for that, it takes attention. You need to broaden your span. You need to broaden it enough to take in more and more subject and see how the division slowly dissolves and you get this mass. And you can compare the division, the compartmentalizations that's done previously to the local idea in classical physics. And it doesn't hold. Actually, knowledge is everywhere, accessible from different points depending on where you are. But no one can see where you are from the outside. That is in itself a lesson we learn from the mirror. The idea that you are absolutely localized and you can be localized without having a subject. That is one of the illusions, and this is something I hereby deconstruct by using the mirror method. It is impossible. It doesn't work that way. You are always already situated somewhere, and you are situated within space, time, and knowledge. You are somewhere knowledge-wise. There are certain similarities. Remember that the most important, most abstract concepts come directly from space. It's the lesser abstract that might come from time, and the lesser you come down to the scale, the lesser they are directly time. The sharpness comes from that you understand you are situated in reality. let me just recast shortly of the different steps of Upasaka Kuladasa. The first stage is establishing some sort of practice. That is something I also found on the internet by a certain Carl Newton, C-A-L, Newton. And he said that you can establish a deep work, and that means that you learn how to concentrate. You start with maybe half an hour getting into something, not forgetting what's around you, and doing this, practice this regularly, and then you can sort of develop yourself in different steps. And in stage 2, I read here, is most interesting. You almost come to the Renaissance. You will notice that your periods of mind wandering are becoming shorter, and the periods of attention becomes longer. Willpower cannot prevent the mind from wander away. And you cannot force the process either. You can't force the mind to be aware of its wandering. No, you can only hold, and that's not so only, you can hold the intention to appreciate the introspective awareness that mind wandering is going on, but gently and firmly redirect attention back to whatever is the object for attention, and try to engage your mental faculty to the highest level. And this is also the discarding of the compartmentalization of knowledge that we have. This is opening up. You can compare the idea that all knowledge is separated and have nothing to do with each other, and you can just go into one tiny part of that. You can compare that to mind wandering. That's the idea that you don't have access to the wholeness of the world, that you're not situated in the world. You are somewhere outside of the world, and you pick for handen just one singular specific subject, and you put that under the microscope, and you discard the idea of a subject that is in reality. Instead, the subject becomes this narrow line that puts its light on that singular subject. Whereas in reality, to understand something fully, you will not shut out what is around you. You can slowly and carefully and in a manner that is soft and flexible take in the tiniest, minutest detail without losing any of the surrounding attention, just like animals do. And we wish to show you an animal here, like a bird or something, that it has the capability to both attend a larvae on the ground and be completely aware of the surroundings. Because if it could not do that to the fullest, that bird would not be around anymore. Because we have hawks all over the place here. Seen loads of them the last couple of days. And they'll be sure to take down any bird that for some reason only can look at the larvae, and when they do that, everything around them disappears. No, what this narrow concentration actually is, it's a shutting out of knowledge, shutting out of understanding, and making the energy of understanding weaker and weaker and weaker. So in the end, everything is at the distance, and what you take in is only the shadows of reality. Yes, that's the cave myth. It's not a myth. That is actually how we live today. If we let the mirror image be the guiding light and we practice that guiding light all the time. We will cut our attention, we will cut our ego into small pieces that do not fit together as a continuous self. No wonder Nietzsche also called uh, the modern days for death of the self. It does have some point, and most of the interpretations of Eastern philosophy and religion is that it wants to take out the ego, or take out the self, or take out the subject, or take out the observer. That interpretation is 100% Greek, Western. That's the idea that we don't acknowledge like an idea. It seemed to be for us for something that we can perceive in the world. It's part of reality, that the subject has nothing to do with his reality. You can compare this, of course. Subject can also be compared to a singular, sharper, reflective nature of reality slash consciousness. An object can be the more encompassing that goes around you and is less influenceable by your intentions. Let's say you're a bird, your intention is going to be the subjective thing, your hunger compared with the deliciousness of the larvae. Whereas in the objectives, where you don't have that much interest, or not as much interest, because how often compared to larvae do you stumble upon a hawk? Maybe only once or twice a day, which of course is more than enough to make you one day old only. But it's not enough that you should have this sharpness to it. It should be broad and relaxed. The attention that is around you should be relaxed. And there you will notice that also the attention to the singular small thing, the larvae or whatever it is you want to learn, is going to become sharper as well. Once you relax your eyes, because this has a lot to do with the eyes themselves, and you get this softer vision. Try to smile with your eyes, or not glaringly open them like Forsberg, Foppa Forsberg, the ice hockey player. But relax your vision, make it both singularly and take in the periphery. So you see, body and soul, knowledge, time, space, they go hand in hand and not divided, not parted, as we so much common usually understand it to be. It's a great difference actually, and that's one of those insight that comes after time. And this is a skill, as I mentioned. You will become better and better. And I can tell from my own experience, when I started to read now without paying too much attention, sort of a relaxed reading where I take in the environment, my perception is I don't see the text anymore. Text becomes absent somehow. But after I read a couple of pages, this takes a lot more time, of course, to have this relaxed eye view on the pages, just because you're not used to it. I am not used to it. Then I realize I have actually read the text, but it feels completely unfamiliar, weird even. It feels as if my eyes are not touching the text. This is a better sort of eyes to have on the text than the sharp one, the pointy one, the hard one, the one that makes your eyes tired in the end. That's not a reason why we shouldn't do it. The reason is you get a better understanding with relaxed eyes. There is Rather a massive difference. Well, I think that's fine for now. I wish you a very pleasant afternoon. It was a great pleasure doing a little deconstructive exercise on myself. Do try in different subjects, and do take it easy in the beginning, because this is a skill that takes time. There's no wonder about that. So don't overdo it or try too hard. Take it easy out there. Cheers. Bye bye.